Hey everyone, welcome to the Forever Young podcast, where we meet with anti-aging, longevity, and regen industry experts to unlock the secrets of staying forever young. This podcast is sponsored by Harper Media. If you're interested in our solutions to grow and scale your business and stand out strong against your competitors, comment growth in the comments section or visit our website at theharpermedia.com. Now, let's start the show. I'm here today with John Mark Pero, founder of Levers.Health, a telehealth platform revolutionizing anti-aging through personalized performance medicine. We'll explore how his science-backed prescription plans like semaglutide for weight loss and B12 for energy empower clients to live healthier and longer. John, welcome to our show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Hayden.
Thanks for being here. So can you tell us what you did before you started Levers and what sparked your interest in the anti-aging and longevity industry?
Yeah, certainly. I have always been into health. I grew up on green juice. I was a personal trainer in college, but I actually studied engineering and I worked in construction and tech prior to starting Levers. I always knew entrepreneurship was in my path. And so after one failed business, I was back in engineering and consulting. I did some products, program management type roles for construction tech companies. But I knew entrepreneurship was the path for me. So I actually took some time off to figure out what I wanted to do. And that's how Levers came to be. But it was always construction tech, product and program management before that. I think I had 4 jobs with hard hats. And one of the reasons I wanted to start a telehealth company was the location independence that came with that as well. But I've always been passionate about health, and then my own health journey is what kind of led me into this space.
Would you mind sharing a bit about your health journey?
Certainly. Yeah. So I have 2 very messed up discs, my 2 lowest discs in my back, and a torn labrum in my hip. And I went through the traditional medicine route of I did hip surgery. I actually tore the labrum again after that. And then on the backside, I did PRP, did the steroid shots. None of that really helped. And the doctors at that point, I was working with some of the best doctors that worked on the Rams and Dodgers in LA. And he basically said, well, count your blessings. I can't really do anything for you. Just deal with the pain for the rest of your life. And I was like, well, he's like, or we could fuse it. And so I started looking at regenerative medicine, stem cells, exosomes, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, PEMF. I went down that road and I had a lot of success with them. Some of the best success I had was with peptides, a few peptides for healing and inflammation and things like that. And so that was all around and I spent a ton of money on this process, but that was around the time I was looking to start a new company. And when I put the pieces together of, oh my God, this stuff works. I'm passionate about health. This is something I really care about. It can be delivered in an online format. This was 2.5 years ago when nobody really knew what peptides were. And we decided to launch Levers. Like Levers kind of came to be on the other end of that journey after I took some time off to figure out what I wanted to do. I had all these kind of stem cells and stuff like that, a bunch of the regen anti-aging stuff, right? That we're all into. And yeah, Levers came out the other side of that.
So what peptides did you use that actually helped you with your spine injury? Because I have a neck injury myself. I don't know if you heard about the Murph workout.
Yeah, yes, yeah, the
And
CrossFit, it's
CrossFit.
like a timed, yeah.
Yeah, it was super intense. I did that maybe 2 years ago, and then I hurt my neck, so I had to stop CrossFit. And ever since then, I've just had neck pain that kind of comes and goes. Going to the chiropractor helps, but it's like a temporary relief because it just comes back in a couple of weeks. So I might need to do the same thing you did.
Yes, and one thing I found with a lot of these things is every little thing does a little bit. There's no silver bullets or full cures out there for a lot of skeletal things, specifically with your spine. But what worked for me and what helped for me was just reducing the inflammation and supporting the muscles and everything around the spine, because my issues are with the discs, and I imagine yours are up with the discs in your neck. You can't really do a lot with that. The tissue doesn't regenerate. And there are people that will do intradiscal. You could do a BPC 157 is one peptide. Some people will do the stem cells. Questionable efficacy on that. But the theory and the thought is, well, if you can just promote a healing environment around it, it will allow it to either, if it's slipped, to kind of get back into place a little bit. And then one issue with disc things as well is because it's like, if you think about it, like when you have a pain on your finger, the more you like hit it, it gets more and more sensitive. And so it becomes oversensitized. And so by supporting, and then what happens when it's oversensitized is the muscles can get weak around it, and then you avoid it. And so when you avoid it, like it just creates this weak environment, which can then subject it to more injury. So my thought is just give everything around it the best healing environment. So the peptides I use, it's really probably the most popular peptide is BPC 157. That one I love. That was like, whoa, it reduced pain and inflammation. Another one called TB 500, which is another healing peptide. And then I used a third combo, which isn't specifically for healing, but it was good to, I did an MRI and I had weak fatty muscle tissue around my spine from like me adjusting my behaviors and stuff to try to protect my spine, but then it had actually become weaker. So I did a combination called CJC plus ipamorelin, and there's a bunch of names. Those two peptides work on your pituitary gland to secrete more growth hormone. Growth hormone promotes muscle, lean muscle mass, fat loss, and a few things that are just positive for a healing environment. So for me, it was like the combination of all those things. The BPC and the TB 500 were more for the healing specifically. And then the growth hormone support peptides, I just felt great too. I felt great. I was sleeping better. I started leaning out. My gym recovery time went down. I was like, oh my God, these things are cheap. They're safe. They're effective. Why aren't more people doing these with doctor supervision?
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for the tips. I'll have to try that.
Yeah. And then on the neck, have you tried the iron neck?
The iron neck? What's that?
It's a workout. It's like a device. That's the other thing is like like PT, working with trainers and stuff is really important here too. Chiropractic is good. The iron neck looks like a helmet, and it has like a rubber band or like a cord and you do these series of neck exercises. And that's one, and it just strengthens, again, just working with everything surrounding the neck is really good. I think it's about $300. I've heard really good things about that. And my chiropractor as well, I have some neck cracking and stuff. And he told me also this environment we put ourselves in, right? We're hunched over a computer and looking down. My neck's actually starting to curve. He really recommended that to me. I haven't used it though, so I would be, yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, thanks for the tip. I'll look it up. Yeah, I asked ChatGPT and it said a multifaceted approach as well with PT, so that could really help with the PT.
Yeah.
So when did you start Levers and how did you grow it into the success that it is today?
Certainly. Yeah, we still feel so early. We launched in August of 2023. We launched in just one state, and we launched with the peptides I just mentioned, BP, the same ones that I had success with. And our thesis at the time was there's a bunch of doctors getting into peptides, but nobody was really doing it in a e-com D2C fashion because they weren't FDA approved. And then simultaneously, though, you had telehealth taking off, and then most peptides exist in this regulatory gray area of quote unquote research chemicals. So we said, can we just do it by the book and actually prescribe it through a compounding pharmacy? So we launched in August. In November, the FDA added all of the peptides we love to a list called the Category 2 list, which prohibited compounding pharmacies from making them. And so we actually lost prescription access to all the drugs we started with. And we always knew at that point that GLPs would be part of it. Some of these other ones, NAD, not all of the peptide, NAD is not a peptide, but not everything went away. So we pivoted at that point. We had just launched the company and we had to pivot 2 months in. We believed in the GLP-1s. Everyone at the peptide conferences were all about them. And they've actually even gotten more exciting since then. But yeah, that's how we got started. And then that was late 2023. And then all of 2024, we're bootstrapped. We have a small team. We're pretty lean and mean. We added more states. We went from 1 state to 25 now. We've added other products like the B12, like the NAD, like the Somorelin and things like that. And we're actually about to be able to bring back some of the original peptides under a new compliance model. And so that's one thing we're really excited about. It's like, we've been trying to build really slow because our big focus is service. We don't want to get to a place where people are upset or not having success, especially with the GLPs. Those require a really high level of service and care. So we've just been pacing ourselves on this and really laying a foundation. And now it feels like we're actually ready to scale. But most of our growth just came through paid advertising, which has its own set of complications and what you can and can't say and do. But yeah, that's it. We know it's been slow and steady. We had a good year last year. We have a small team now. We have 3 doctors and 4 people full time and a few part time.
Awesome. And how do you navigate the advertising space with things like peptides? Because I know a lot of other people that have come on the show that sell different things like peptides have had a hard time, especially with the Meta platform, selling it on there because I think they gave a few reasons. One was it's not FDA approved, and another is they couldn't really say what the peptides were used for. So they had a hard time figuring out how to advertise. How did you navigate around that?
Yeah, so there's a few different approaches with Meta specifically. There's actually this organization that I consider the mafia of healthcare advertising. They're called LegitScript, and they tell you what you can and can't advertise for. And Meta and TikTok and Google, they don't want to deal with any of this. So they will outsource their decision making to LegitScript. And then LegitScript will tell the companies what they can and can't sell. So LegitScript won't actually certify you if you sell certain peptides or components that they don't deem appropriate. And that's what a lot of the med spas and stuff fall into because they're offering products that aren't compliant with LegitScript. And if you do have LegitScript, you can apply to advertise for medications online for Meta. And that's what we have. We have LegitScript. That kind of gets you into the next layer of even if you can technically legally advertise for these things, Meta has its own source of restrictions of what you can and can't say and what you can and can't do. So we've worked with our account rep, and we're a small company, so we don't have a dedicated account support like some of the bigger ones. But we went through a series of pre-reviews, what you can and can't say, and we've sort of found a realm in which we can. They have a lot of policies too, but it's all algorithmically proven. And so we get rejections. We've had ad accounts taken down. We've had everything has been shut down multiple times, but we're finally at a place where we think we know what we can say and what we can't say. We think we know what we can and can't advertise for. It's a hard space because if you don't say anything, the ad isn't going to convert. You're just going to be spending all your money. But then if you are too aggressive with the ad, you also can't make promises and stuff like that. Then Meta will shut you down. So it's been a little bit of a dance. We're also actively diversifying from Meta. Most peptide companies, most forward-thinking companies are leaning more into affiliates, influencers, and creators, and basically spreading out their ads to those other accounts so that their ad account isn't at risk of being flagged.
Yeah.
On that LegitScript piece, a lot of payment processors won't work with you if you don't have that certification. So a lot of the med spas, and as we add some of these other peptides back in, we're going to have that challenge of running ads on these platforms without that approval. And there's there's creative ways to get around some of this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's platform risk, and most companies should think about diversifying off of the big ones.
Thank you for sharing that. I know we talked about some of the challenges you face in growing and scaling your business, some of the challenges you face with advertisement. Are there any other challenges you face as a company?
The 2 biggest challenges are regulation and competition. Competition is less of a challenge because that exists in every business. The issue with telehealth is it's such a cool, exciting field, and it's such a big opportunity that you're competing with some of the smartest people in the industry. So that's challenging. And on the internet, the moat isn't very high. At the end of the day, we're a services provider, and that we're not very differentiated from other great services providers. Competition element is real. The bigger piece for peptides, for telehealth, for weight loss, for some of these other things is regulation. You have very powerful industry forces that are used to a certain way of healthcare. And simultaneously, you have a wave of consumer education and choice and change that is challenging that. And we're seeing that play out in real time. Also, with the new healthcare administration, there's a lot of stuff getting overturned and upended right now, trying to end certain advertising, trying to change drug pricing and stuff like that. And then the drug companies, on the other hand, have been pushing back. They've been suing telehealth companies. They've been suing compounding pharmacies. They've been pushing back on we think the drug companies are part of the reason why all those peptides got banned a few years ago. And now those pharmacies pressured the FDA to end the quote unquote shortage for GLP-1 drugs as well, so that the demand could shift back to the manufacturers. And there's a whole bunch of lawsuits and challenges with navigating that space as well. So it feels like every other week there's a new lawsuit, there's a new ruling coming from the FDA or the local state medical board. There's also state by state compliance, which is a whole mess. There's a lot of trolls out there. There's a lot of legal trolls that'll take you down for a privacy policy or for like not having a certain consent box or stupid stuff like that. So that's probably been the biggest challenge, is actually compliance when the rug constantly gets pulled out from under us. Like the drugs we launched with, we don't sell currently. And that's happened several times where we've had a direction, we have happy patients, healthy, like these are amazing compounds that people love. And then we just get the rug pulled out from under us. So I think it's just part of the game. We have to trust that we're doing the right thing, and we have to have our ducks in a row on a legal and compliance side and says, hey, we have integrity here. We're upholding the spirit and letter of the law. It's just challenging when it shifts. Everything else is pretty easy. I mean, customer service, like that's one thing we're really good at, is service. People love us. They have a really high level of support. The healthcare side, we have good doctors. As long as you have good intake forms, you talk to patients, you understand them, that piece is relatively easy. And then on the competition side, like I said, there's a bunch of smart operators. Pricing pressure plays in here. There seems to be a race to the bottom on pricing on a lot of these protocols, which is good for the consumer, but it's hard without differentiation. You're competing on price, which typically means you're competing on volume, which means the value accrues to the largest players in the space, like Hims and Roe and some of the big ones.
True. And on that note of policy changes around drugs too, it was actually Trump said this about maybe a couple weeks ago. He said he wanted to lower the prescription prices of all the drugs 30 to 80%. I'm like, all right, dude, you say a lot of stuff all the time just to say stuff. So we'll see if it actually happens. I was hoping it would happen, but of course, haven't heard anything of it. So
They
we'll see.
just released pricing targets last Wednesday. Yeah, so
Didn't?
they haven't made them public yet, but that is part of it's a push and pull between industry here. That's a really interesting point, because it's an example of a move by the government that says, hey, this is actually the new path forward. The drug companies will more or less need to play ball. Otherwise, there will be other alternate paths that HHS will take and the FDA will take. So a few ways this could play out. If you think about the GLP-1 drug situation, for example, those drugs were $1,000 plus a month cash pay. And then they even still, and not many insurance companies will cover them, even still, they were sold out to the point where there was a shortage of those drugs. So the FDA came in and said, compounding pharmacies can make essential copies of these drugs, even though they're still patented. That's been going on for the last 2 years. You've had healthcare companies spend their advertising dollars to bring in patients not healthcare companies, telehealth companies, and spent ad dollars to bring in patients for these compounded GLP-1 drugs, which many of these patients have had super success with, but they can only afford them at that price point because they're still not covered by insurance. Then the drug companies pressured the FDA to end the shortage, meaning those patients lost, a lot of patients are losing access to those medications, which means that they now have to go pay name brand prices. This executive order came in that says, hey, we're not going to pay more than an equivalent country would pay, such as in Europe. These compounds don't cost that much to produce. Now, all the money is on the front end of getting them approved. It takes like $3 billion to get a drug approved, right? And so that's an interesting push and pull. So if the manufacturers meet the price targets that say, hey, you actually should only pay about $200 for this name brand GLP-1 medication, that's that pricing pressure, which again is good for the consumer, that says all consumers will have this at a better price. If the drug companies don't drop those pricing targets, the government could open up other pathways for compounding pharmacies to make these and basically threaten action with the drug companies. So we'll see. The drug companies are some of the most powerful organizations in the country. They have great, smart lawyers. They're really good at what they do. And I mean, it does take a lot of money to bring these things to market. So they do play a very necessary role, and we need to have laws and protections for patents and things like that too. So I don't know, it's really interesting to see it play out in real time. But I'm here trying to navigate that situation, trying to protect access to our existing patients, and then understand what we have to do on the business side. To me, that was like all my e-com friends when the tariffs hit, that was their like, oh my God, are the rugs coming out from under us moment. for me, the executive order and these healthcare challenges is kind of my moment for that.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a lot about the GLP-1s, and one thing you notice is that people don't always use them the most effective way. They're not using them the right way. They just want to get access to the drugs. What ways should people use the GLP-1s, and what lifestyle choices should they make so the medication works better?
Yeah, great question. There's a good book on this called Magic Pill that I would recommend. And it's just all about the industry, how it's changed culture and all these things. Behavior change is really hard. And the proper way to use these medications is as the tool that they are. They are incredibly effective. And even if someone does absolutely nothing different and they just take the medication, they are lowering their chance of all cause mortality. Now, they will be dependent on this drug for the rest of their life. That's the trade off. What's the long term effect? We don't know. But still, the side effects, the risk benefit ratio seems to still be in favor of taking these drugs if you didn't change a thing. Now, the issue again, you have dependence, you have potential plateaus, tolerance building, and everything like that. The right way to use these medications is as a tool to support behavior change and to cement that behavior change as you go. So, what we've seen is some patients, as they get going, they haven't been able to exercise a lot because maybe they're carrying around a lot of the weight on their knee or something like that. And as that weight, even psychologically, as that weight starts to come off, it creates this snowball effect of positive momentum that says, oh my God, this is possible. I'm seeing progress. This thing is working for me when nothing else has worked for me. It does make it easier to make healthier food choices. And so the right way to approach this is as you go to start layering in all the healthier behaviors. A few other elements is not to go too fast with the dosing or the weight loss, because the faster you lose weight, the more percentage of muscle mass you will lose alongside of fat mass. And if you're losing muscle mass, your BMR, the amount of calories you burn, is going down. And if you stop taking the medication or you don't make those lifestyle changes, if you lose, let's say you lose 50 pounds and a third of that is muscle, and then you go off the medication, you've never changed a thing, you start gaining that weight back. Most of that weight you gain back is actually going to be fat. And so that's actually a bad situation to be in. So the right way to go about it is to go slow with the dosing so that you're losing less muscle, to prioritize resistance training, which is weights, not cardio, like actual weightlifting. It could be body weight, it could be squats, it could be anything, but it has to be resistance training. You're signaling your muscles to maintain themselves and to rebuild. And then to get adequate protein intake, we recommend 1 gram of protein per pound per day, which is pretty standard for the fitness community. It's kind of a lot of protein for people that aren't used to eating that much protein. But if you do those 3 things, low and slow with the dosing, resistance training, and protein, people are actually losing mostly fat mass and very little muscle mass. And if you really dial in that dosing, that's why a lot of the biohackers and the longevity people are using these at small doses, because at small doses, they're losing almost 0%. They're losing almost no fat, and they're able to just kind of tune their metabolism a little bit with these things. So that's the right way to use them. Does everybody use them that way? No. How do you drive behavior change throughout all of this? It's education, it's support, it's mindset, it's community. It's pretty complicated. It's like we got in this mess. It took us a lot to get in this mess, but yeah, that's how I'd recommend approaching that. And that's what we try to take with our patients as well. Now, granted, everyone is going to have their own response to that. It's up to us to help. We gotta kind of meet them where they're at, and that's with the drugs that work, and then also show them and educate them and teach them this better way. And a lot of them, I'd say actually most of them, are willing and wanting to do that work, but it's a little bit of behavior change that we need to drive.
And with the lower dose GLP-1s, can you tell us about the program that you're working on piloting to start something like this within your company?
Yeah. So we're working on a low dose GLP-1 program. There's a lot of people in the health and fitness community that are finding benefit with these things at lower doses for reasons not as associated with weight loss. So blood sugar regulation, inflammation reduction. One of the original use cases for these drugs was for Alzheimer prevention, of reducing inflammation in the brain to reduce plaque buildup and stuff like that. So there's all these encouraging signals in terms of regulating biomarkers and doing certain things that are independent of weight loss. Now, the current generation of GLP-1 drugs, and again, this is like early. I mean, GLP-1 drugs have been around for about 15 years. But the current generation, semaglutide, Ozempic, tirzepatide, Zepbound, and those ones mostly are working, they're often working on a lot of satiation and hunger elements, as well as some of these other metabolic pathways. Some of the newer drugs have less of the hunger elements and actually more of the fat loss and fat burning and blood sugar control and stuff like that. So people are finding success with these at low doses to resolve certain things like inflammatory conditions, PCOS, elements of that nature, inflammation, pain, things like that. Now, there's also, for some of them, there's this added benefit of, there's also like mood elements that people are looking at here. Now, many of those people will also find it easier to have portion control and make smart eating choices and stuff like that. So while the drugs are approved and intended for obesity and conditions where people have much more to lose, the new wave of doctors, the new wave of longevity folks are using them off label at lower doses for these other conditions. And that's something that we want to lean into, because that's, for us, more of the direction of our company with the peptides, with the blood optimization, with all the other protocols. It's like, let's just fine tune levers. Like, that's the name of the company. We have these little levers we can tweak: diet, exercise, sleep, like mindset. There's all these big levers, but then you have these areas you can tweak with medications as well. And yeah, we're super excited to launch this low dose protocol. It's not approved for any of these things. A lot of this is anecdotal, but people are having success with it. And then some people, a lot of women around menopause, there's hormonal imbalances that can help be remedied with some of these things. And so if it supports getting that last 5 to 10 pounds off for people as well, that's really great. Now, again, we need to be really careful with the dosing. There is potential for abuse for these things, and that's something we need to be really considerate of.
With the medication that you're giving out, since it'll be a lower dose, will the cost also be lower too?
Yes, that's another great thing. Most people are paying for the medication on a dose by dose basis. Most telehealth companies, they kind of rip people off because they say, hey, it's the same price at every dose, and they just charge the max price for any dose. Our low dose program will be a lower price as well, which can give access to people that wouldn't typically have it. And yeah, that's the way we're going to approach it.
That's great. And you also mentioned that there's newer GLP-1s that target more fat specifically and not as much muscle or hunger cravings. What are some of those GLP-1s that are newer and target the fat more?
Yeah, so one really exciting one. There's many in development, and honestly, I don't even know them all. But the one that people are really excited about right now is called retatrutide. So these drugs, you could almost think of them as like generations of drugs. So semaglutide, Ozempic, was the first one that actually had the efficacy and half-life to be really useful. We had liraglutide before semaglutide, but semaglutide was like the really great one. Semaglutide targets a receptor called GLP-1, which regulates blood sugar, insulin secretion, feelings of hunger, satiety, and things like that. Then the second wave came out. It's only working on one hormone. The second wave came out targeting GLP-1 and a second hormone called GIP. That's tirzepatide. Tirzepatide, by targeting two hormones versus one. GIP also has to do with hunger and satiation, but it has additional metabolic pathways. By targeting both, it leads to a greater reduction in weight with typically fewer side effects. Tirzepatide is by far seen as the better equivalent to semaglutide and Ozempic at this point. So that one hormone, semaglutide, two hormones, tirzepatide, the new one called retatrutide, which is not approved yet, but it should be approved in about 6 months, we believe. It's being made by Eli Lilly. Targets three hormones. So they call it triple G. So it's GLP-1, GIP, and then glucagon. And then, so glucagon is interesting because it has less to do with hunger and satiation and more to do with metabolism. And so it's revving up fat loss pathways and things like that to better support weight loss. That drug seems to have fewer appetite elements. So you're seeing people in the biohacking community adopt retatrutide. They still get it through these other sources, but people are having a lot of success with that at low doses to support a healthy weight and metabolic markers, blood sugar control and blood sugar regulation and things like that, lowering A1C without triggering a bunch of side effects or weight loss. So that's, I think, the most exciting one. I just saw like 2 days ago, there's a new one they're developing in China that also targets glucagon. I forget the name of that. Novo Nordisk is developing one. I believe it's called like cagrilintide. That one is targeting different pathways. There's a bunch of companies targeting a bunch of things. I read in a book, I forget which, They were saying we are continually finding more and more hormones that are impacting metabolism and weight more than we originally thought. And so it is an exciting time for that.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't know a new one's coming out in 6 months. That's really exciting. How long do you think it'll take for it to hit the market so people can start trying it out?
That's a great question. So some companies are offering it already. We don't really think that's the most legal or appropriate way to do it. I believe it's in phase 3 trial. I don't have a great answer on that. I think it's about 6 months. It will probably be incredibly expensive. It might go on the shortage list. We don't know. I know Eli Lilly will really try to protect that one to get other people from having it, off label or off brand. But I think it's probably later this year. I don't know for certain.
Okay. So, when it comes to different performance enhancing compounds and protocols, really famous people, really wealthy people have been using them for a long time, like Kim Kardashian and Hailey Bieber, who are taking NAD. And that's how a lot of people found out about it. I even found out about it from, who was it? Kendall Jenner. I don't watch her show, but I saw a clip of her on Instagram taking NAD, and she said she was going to stay young forever. So, that's when I looked it up and I started taking supplements myself. And it seems like these different performance enhancing compounds and protocols are becoming more and more accessible for everyday consumers. Can you speak more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe awareness is a big piece of this, and then access as well. So what we often see is that these protocols start incredibly expensive. And then as they catch on, as volume increases and adoption increases, the cost typically comes down. So also when you're selling and marketing these things, there is a part of your cost is marketing and getting people to understand what these compounds are. And so when you have famous people effectively doing the marketing for you, you could focus on just providing the service at a better cost. So as these things drive adoption, there's a lot of powerful levers out there. Hormone therapy is a big one. NAD is incredibly popular. I think this stuff just comes in waves. Honestly, NAD has been around for a long time, and certain longevity doctors were always excited about it. But the popularity, largely driven by the elites, is getting interest in more of a mainstream crowd. And then you actually have companies like us that are trying to make it a little bit more accessible. So NAD, for example, if you go do there's also multiple ways to take NAD. If you go do an IV drip, that could cost you $500 to $700 a session to do probably around 500 milligrams of NAD. And it's best practice to do that every other week for several weeks and then maybe do it once a month. So that gets incredibly expensive. Most people can't afford that. When you do the IV, it's very bioavailable because it's going straight into your blood. Then you have the next way, which is a little bit more accessible, more value, is the subcutaneous injection. So you actually do that at home. That's what we provide with a small syringe that doesn't hurt at all. And then you space out your injections every other day. So rather than taking a giant dose all at one time, you're taking small doses every couple days. Hypothesis, we actually think this might be better because you're giving your body more time to absorb it. When you put it in the bloodstream, your kidneys are going to filter out a lot of that NAD. And so anything that doesn't get absorbed into the cells, you could just be losing. It's like drinking 10 cups of coffee one day versus drinking 1 cup of coffee 10 days in a row. So if you do the subcutaneous injection over time, not only do you get more value, we do 2,000 milligrams of NAD, which is 4 times as much as a single IV, for $300 for the cost of 1 or a half IV, and you could do it conveniently at home. So that's the second way. We think that's the best in terms of bang for your buck. Do you get the full absorption you do with an IV? No. But when you spread it out and you factor in the value, that's what people seem to love and we think is the best. Then you have supplements. Supplements aren't actually NAD. They're precursors to NAD. They're either NMN or NR. The theory is you give your cells the building blocks for NAD. They'll make it themselves. You can't take NAD orally because it'll break down in your gut. There's also liposomal NAD, which we think is kind of BS. It's because NAD is a water-soluble, not a fat-soluble molecule. So we don't think the liposomal has that much absorption. And then there's nasal spray as well, which is interesting because anything you do nasally has greater absorption. So some people are doing NAD nasally and they're reporting some of those brain cognitive mood benefits, but still seemingly less than the IVs or the sub-Q. So summarize, it's like you could do an IV injection, most expensive, highest bioavailability. You could do the subcutaneous injection, which is very high bioavailability, best value, best sort of bang for your buck, in our opinion. You could do the nasal spray, which is a little goopy and we don't think is that great. And then you could do the supplements, which are the cheapest, but also kind of the worst option, in our opinion. And different doctors like different ways, but a lot of doctors are really going the subcutaneous injection route.
And
Price is coming down. People love this stuff.
when you say subcutaneous or sub-Q, I don't even know how to say it. I don't know necessarily what that means. Does that mean you inject it into the fat or into the muscle?
That's a great question. I forget. I have a syringe because I did one of these earlier, but it's typically, I know people are listening to this, but it is a small insulin needle. So it's about 1/4 of an inch long. It's a tiny needle, and you typically stick it in the fat. So you can pinch your belly fat. You could put it straight into the shoulder. I usually do it kind of below my waist. So just in case, like, there's a little pinprick or something, I don't want to see it. But most people do that. We actually did a pop-up a few weeks ago where we were doing NAD and B12 injections at this wellness event. And people are like, oh my God, like this doesn't hurt at all. And most people kind of experience that. There's this fear and this sort of thought that needles are dirty and it's kind of, it looks a little sketchy. Once you do it one time, you're like, oh my God, that didn't hurt at all. I get it now.
Yeah, and it looks like the same needle that you use for the GLP-1.
Correct. Yep.
How long does it take for the positive effects of it to start kicking in when you inject it, and what positive effects can people expect?
Yes. So with the NAD, you typically feel it within an hour. And that's part of the reason if you're doing the IV drip, it can be a little bit uncomfortable because you're taking so much at one time. But you typically feel this rush of energy, clarity. I notice a mood improvement the same day I take it. The first 30 minutes or so, depending on your dose, it's like a lot. It's like you just drank a Monster Energy drink or something. It's like nature's Adderall a little bit. Again, because NAD is it's a bioidentical molecule. Every single cell in your body makes NAD. It's involved in over 400 processes in your cell. So you're just taking something you already have, but it's giving you this boost. So you typically feel it same day, and then for several days, there's often an elevated mood. Some people report sleep benefits, metabolic benefits. One of the reasons why people are using it for anti-aging is because it's involved in DNA repair and transcription. So it's protecting when your DNA is replicating, it's protecting against mistakes. And then it's involved again because it's involved in the mitochondrial and the ATP energy cycle within the cell. So the theory is you are optimizing the efficiency cell at the farthest upstream region effectively. And every disease state, every inflammatory condition, everything is downstream of the mitochondria. And if you're making the cell more efficient, then everything else should theoretically be more efficient. But most people just feel energized and clear and they feel good. And that's kind of like, it's like one of those things. That's another reason why it's a cool therapy, because a lot of longevity therapies, you don't always know if it's working. You kind of have to take people's word for it. Like, oh, this is good for my telomeres, but like maybe that'll help me live longer, but I can't feel anything and I'm spending all this money on this thing. Whereas NAD, it builds up, the benefits sort of build up over time, but you also feel it right away. And it's one of those nice ones where you're like, oh, this is actually doing something.
That's great. It sounds like a good replacement for coffee too, because I used to be a big coffee drinker, but when I got older, I think it started like probably in my early 20s. I couldn't drink coffee anymore because I already have like a lot of natural energy myself. So when I drink coffee, I just get even more energy, and it just turns into like this anxious energy where I can't even focus and concentrate. But when I started taking the NAD supplements, which, like you said, is an actual real NAD, it's just the building blocks for it. But even with that, after a couple of weeks, my energy improved a lot, my focus, my mental clarity.
Really great. Oh,
It's
that's awesome.
It's been a big help.
Yeah, a lot of people report sleep as well, which is interesting because you're thinking energy, is it going to keep me up? Yeah, sleep. Oh my God. Sleep is one of, I think exercise, sleep, and diet. Sleep might be the most important.
Yeah.
Like it's so big. And if you can improve your sleep, then everything else can improve too. Do you do the supplements still, and do you drink coffee still?
I do the supplements. I don't drink coffee anymore because I just had to quit coffee, man. I quit coffee a couple of years ago. Sometimes there's an emergency case where I'm a software engineer. So sometimes I get a big project. I'm like, I'm going to have to pull an all-nighter. Then I'll drink like maybe a third of a cup of coffee from Starbucks. And that's all it takes for me to stay up all day. I'm really sensitive to caffeine. But yeah, I haven't had to take coffee. And this NAD just helps so much. Even with sleep, it's been a pleasant surprise because before I started taking it, I was having issues going to sleep. I've always been a night owl. I think I inherited that from my mom because I remember when I was a kid, she'd still be up at like 3 in the morning just walking around the house. And I'm kind of the same way. But now when I want to go to bed, I can actually go to bed. And it hasn't been like that for a long time. So I'm really grateful for the supplement.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. I've tried one of the supplements. I should try a few more. I noticed a little bit, but it wasn't, I was like, it wasn't as much as I hoped for.
Yeah, the injections sound like they're a lot better. And it's a great price point too. You said it was 300 a month.
300, it's really enough to last you about 6 or 7 weeks. So it's actually less than that. We're about to launch a smaller because we provide a lot. So you could, if you're intense, you could do it all in a month, but most people space it out to like 6 or 7 weeks. We're going to launch a smaller size that's more of a monthly subscription, which will be even less.
This sounds
Again,
amazing.
it's not cheap. 300 a month is that's a lot of money.
That's way better than like the $700 it costs for an Ivy, though.
Right. I agree. 100%.
Yeah, let's talk more about it after the show because I'm actually really curious
Yeah, I
about
want to see if I
trying
can
it
get you
now.
some. You're in, we don't ship to DC. That's the thing. We'll
Darn
have
it.
to, yeah, we're in a lot of states, but we're not in DC yet, but we can figure something out.
What other compounds, protocols, and peptides do you offer? What are some of your favorites and most effective ones?
Yeah, so a lot of my favorites are some of the peptides. The NAD is the most, I would say, trending right now because people love it. You could feel it. The GLPs are our most popular. Those ones, everyone knows what they are. They come looking to us. We have a great price on those as well. And so they like us for that. The low dose GLP we think will be really popular. We also do two I'm really excited about. One of them, B12 shots, which are good for detoxification, a little bit of energy, and liver health. Those are a good complement to the weight loss medications, as is the NAD, because people can get fatigued on the weight loss medications. The B12, those have been around for a while. They're good. They're good for your metabolism, but they're not going to like push you over the edge, and they'll give you a little bit of an energy boost. I'll do those here and there. One I really like is one of the growth hormone peptides called Somorelin. So I told you about those growth hormone peptides that I took when I started peptides. I still love those. I currently take the Somorelin. Somorelin is the only growth hormone peptide that is FDA approved. So it has more studies. Again, it acts on your pituitary gland to secrete more growth hormone, which is a much more natural cycle than actually taking growth hormone. Taking growth hormone can be dangerous. You risk desensitizing the receptors on your cells, which is a permanent change. Taking a growth hormone peptide is a much more natural approach. Growth hormone influences your deep sleep, your stage 4 sleep, your bone density, your lean muscle mass, your fat loss, also increases cognition. It increases BDNF in your brain. It increases collagen turnover in your skin. People have this kind of glowy, dewy glow with those ones. So Somorelin is awesome. Love that one. Each growth hormone peptides has its slightly different trade-offs in terms of certain hormone profiles, certain side effects, and things like that. Most of them don't have any. The only real changes or side effects is it can impact certain hormones, but it's not like there's no real side effects to these peptides. Again, you're not taking growth hormone, you're just taking something to support that. So that one, super excited. That's a good complement to a lot of things. Like if you're in, fitness or anything like that, you're just kind of looking for a little extra push. That one's really nice. What I noticed too with that one is my recovery time goes down. And so if my recovery time goes down, then I could do more the next day and then I can kind of get in a nice fitness routine. And then we're working on a few protocols too that we haven't launched yet, but we're pretty excited about some of these other peptide protocols that were, some of the growth hormone ones, some of the tissue injury inflammation peptides as well. There's a few for immunity that we're really excited about. And then most of these are injectable, but there are some oral formulations as well. So we're working on that. We're about to launch glutathione, which is a really powerful antioxidant. That one's pretty popular as well. And then, yeah, a few miscellaneous things in the work. One thing we're really excited about too is launching a comprehensive blood work panel. So it's like all these things are great. Most of them, most peptide protocols, you don't need to do, it's not required to do blood work, but realistically you should. And so up to this point, we've been outsourcing that and sending sending our patients to other places to do it on their own. But we want to bring that in-house and be able to give people a report card that says, hey, this is how you're doing. You're maybe a little bit low in iron. You're good here, here, here. And that actually helps people track over time the behavior changes. Again, it's not all about medications and supplements and stuff like that. It's about like, how am I living my life and how is that impacting my health? And giving people a clear picture on that with blood work is incredibly important. And then understanding how everything else is going to impact that is really exciting too.
Yeah, it's a great service because even when you get blood work at the doctor, I feel like they just tell you that you're fine, nothing's wrong, but they don't really go into what's going on with your blood, what's going on with the different vitamins and things that are all inside your blood and what you can do to kind of improve on it. Is that something that your company would provide in consultations after the blood work?
Yes. So the standard metabolic panel only tests 14 biomarkers, and it's not really a comprehensive picture of anything. They'll also tell you that you're normal. 9 out of 10 Americans have at least one metabolic disorder. And so normal is not healthy. And so for people that want to have a better look, testing more biomarkers is good, typically around 50. You could go all the way up to 100. Some of these companies are doing even more. There's levels to this stuff, and then there's levels to the service that you could provide. Again, some of this is, can get expensive. So the base level service is going to be effectively a report card with, what does this mean? Where do you stand? What are some things you can do to approve that? And we can deliver that at a price point that people can stomach. And that's how companies like Function Health do it. A la carte service for people that really want to dive in with a provider is to do a consultation. The challenge with that too is you really need, I mean, you could leverage AI tools and things like that, but you really need physicians that understand all of it. And most physicians in your standard clinical setting only know how to read a 14 panel blood test. They're not really as aware of all these other hormone profiles and stuff like that. So bringing that in, and yeah, we plan to have that as an a la carte option if you do want to speak to someone. We also have like unlimited chat support, so that's nice. But a face-to-face is sometimes a little harder to deliver on a 50-state telehealth model, because then you need, you people in every state and stuff like that. But those are all places we'll get to. We're still a young company. We have a pretty big road ahead of us, something we're really excited about. But yeah, we'll get there.
And speaking of AI, last question for the day. What do you think the future of telehealth would look like, especially with all this emergence of new AI tools coming up?
It's incredible. Ultimately, it means better care for people at a lower price, because we're already seeing one issue is you have doctors that study a certain specialty and you're segmented into one of like 50 areas of the body. You don't understand how one thing impacts the other thing impacts the other thing. And so when you combine a few things, you also have this lack of transparency and cohesiveness of clinical data that says, well, I have an MRI from this one company over here, and I did blood work over here, and I have my surgery history over here, but there's no complete picture of any of this stuff. And if you can piece that together and add in someone's blood work and you understand their lifestyle behaviors on top of that, AI is already diagnosing people better than doctors. And so what you're able to do is what's called human in the loop, where you use the AI tools, you use the AI integrations, you make sure you have it all set up correctly, and then you have really good longevity doctors supervise that and train that so it's actually spitting out something that does make sense and is validated by a physician. But AI can do most of the legwork, which means it can be delivered affordably. And if you can do the blood work and you can do some of these other things, you have an opportunity to paint a complete picture of someone's health for them and give them better care than they've ever had access to in history for a fraction of the cost. And we're really excited. Our approach is always like partnerships and integrations. We're not going to go build out the AI tech. We're not those people. We're really good at service and medicine. And so we will integrate those tools and deliver that in a way that people can access. Yeah, it's just super exciting on the diagnostics. People are, yeah, it's also, we have an issue with there's not enough doctors. And
Yeah.
patients on average, I think, spend about 15 minutes with a doctor if they're lucky. And you just don't get a very good experience. And it's still expensive. You're paying $200 for that doctor's visit.
Yeah.
You don't have a very good level of service there. So we think the combination of telehealth, you have video conferencing, you have remote diagnostics, you can do at-home blood tests, you have all these convenience factors to meet people where they're at. Add in that layer of AI and tech that gives people a better view of their health than they've ever had before. And then you have this suite of products that can help optimize that, understanding where the lifestyle pieces need to fit in there. It's just, yeah, it's super exciting. And I think people are ready for this as well. There's this big shift in consumer awareness and education around this stuff that's like, oh, actually, we should be thinking about this before we're sick. And that's super exciting.
Definitely. And I think that like you said, there is more of a push to find different ways to obtain access to healthcare. Because even with doctors, I talked to a doctor sometime last week, and they told me that their salary hasn't really changed or increased over the past 20 years. Like inflation has skyrocketed, but the doctor's salary hasn't really changed as much. It's like the price of living keeps going up, but the pay that doctors get is still the same. So their salary is actually shrinking. And at their health practices, the insurance companies are starting to pay less and less and less for the treatments that they provide too. So now there's less of an incentive to even be a doctor. So to open up healthcare access to people outside of that is a great thing, which I think AI is starting to do.
I agree. And the insurance model has its own challenges. Like obviously people need to get paid. Can drive. We do everything cash pay because we think that, again, if you move healthcare to preventative and proactive, you can get the cost of some of these things down to where people can pay for it. Insurance won't reimburse you for a 100-panel blood test at this point. They say it's unnecessary. If you do that and it teaches you something that you can change your behavior and then you prevent a surgery 10 years down the road, it's not really unnecessary, in my opinion. But again, behavior and policy is shifting in that direction. There are really cool companies pushing the envelope here of how can we get insurance to compensate for some of these things. The current model as it stands today means doctors, any company that deals with insurance, their costs skyrocket just because of the back and forth, the negotiations, the pre-authorizations, the compliance, and everything like that. There's a lot of opportunity for fixing that system, which is, yeah, it's just an exciting space to be in. We're not going to fix it all, but we're going to do our part.
And JM, thank you so much for being here today. I've learned a lot, and especially about the different ways you can take NAD, which I really appreciate. So thank you for educating us.
Cool. Hayden, great. Thank you for having me. Great to be here. It's been really fun chatting with you.
That's all for today's episode of Forever Young. Region leaders share anti-aging secrets. Thanks for joining us to uncover the keys to lasting vitality. If you're interested in checking out Levers.Health, then visit their website at Levers.Health. That's Levers.Health. Don't miss our next episode. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and visit theharpermedia.com to explore how we can help your business grow. Stay vibrant, and we'll catch you next time.